Whoop, whoop. Welcome to another episode of Misfits Social Podcast. How we feeling today, gentlemen?
Like a misfit.
Like a misfit? What'd you do that made you feel like a misfit?
I've just been a misfit all my life. Yeah.
Was it the couch snuggling last night or what?
Silly boys.
Silly boys. Royce, have you ever done physical therapy?
I haven't. I have been fortunate not to be injured or have a need to do physical therapy. I haven't.
Paul,
I probably could use it now.
Paul,
though.
you've done a little bit, yeah.
I turned 50.
Yeah.
That you had to do some physical therapy after you took that curve at 120. That was, I think, licensed for about 30 on a motorbike. Is that right?
Yeah, that was a day that changed my life.
That was a misfit day. Breaking the law.
Yeah, I was laying down, face down in the dirt, and my son Pearson comes running up behind me. He thought I was dead for real. Dad, you know. And I'm laying in the dirt, face down. I kind of woke up. I said, Pearson, something's wrong down the right side of my body. I said, I don't know what it is, but you're not going to hurt me. Roll me over. So he rolled me over in the Texas heat in the middle of July.
Oh, man.
So freaking hot. And he rolled me over into an ant pile. Fire ants.
Sorry, you didn't tell me that when I heard the story.
So fire ants.
Man.
I really didn't feel it. I think my whole body was in some kind of I didn't even
Shock,
notice, but
probably.
people were trying to brush them off. But anyway, yeah, that was not my introduction to Dr. Jackleen.
I'm just
Samuel.
laughing right now. I was like,
Close.
All right, don't. You're not the moderator.
What?
Don't take my job. Don't take my job. Stay
I'm
in your
still,
lane.
I'm still
Stay in
laughing
your
like,
lane.
Preston,
Stay
you
in
think
your
you
lane.
can roll me the other way?
We're still on the fire ants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So listen, in any of your therapy, did you have a therapist that was a space invader? So I've been in the gym before, and some of those gyms where, you know, they're like going to stretch your leg up like this, but like when they go to stretch you, their face is like right here, and they really need
the unnamed guest, you know, they do have to get in your personal space a little bit, which
Oh.
I don't like to be touched. You might remember that.
Was she your therapist?
She was.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that's how you met.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and introduce our therapist. Why don't you give Miss Jackleen her?
I already
big,
did it.
No, do it again, but do it as a moderator. Give her a big welcome.
Oh, okay. So Dr. Jackleen Samuel, I did meet Jackie at before my wreck. She was a friend of ours, and so when I had the wreck, she was the obvious choice for get me back in shape, which was about an 18-month process. So, and when I met Jackie and went to her office in that setting, I saw not only her, she was a one-off with a lot of promise. And I'm looking at this office that she was in and this startup that she was doing, and I just thought, she's going to take it to she's going to be in another world, needs to be in another world. And her story has emerged kind of fast and furious and mercurial in the business world. She got a great business head, and so she's gone far beyond a one-shop physical therapy place. And so I think she's a great guest today to be queried with all kinds of business questions and health questions and that sort of thing. So
That's a grand introduction.
that's pretty
Paul.
good, wasn't it?
I think you're.
I could do better. You want to do another take?
I think you're gunning for my job. Jackie, good
Wouldn't
to
be
have
very
you
hard.
on.
Wouldn't be very
First question is, what kind of therapy did Paul have to go through, and then what kind of patient was he? Was he a good patient, or was he a little bit ornery?
Oh, I'm not allowed to answer that.
Yeah.
Oh,
for real?
That's a privacy.
Here we
No,
go.
I'll
Here we
sign
go.
sign the paper. I don't care.
He's verbally signing it.
I don't care.
Paul was a whiny patient.
No, I wasn't.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait,
Yes.
I retract
We
my
knew it.
statement.
He retracts his
We
statement.
knew
Thank
it.
you for the introduction. That was very nice. No, he shattered his shoulder. I mean, I can't even say he broke it. Like, he shattered that baby. And he had a really long road to recovery. So he stuck it out. You know, I think it was like a year and a half that we had you in that. And at that point, I had a private practice. I was the only PT. I had some assistants, but it was a small, nook.
Yeah.
essentially.
Sure.
But that would allow his whines to echo.
Yeah. Oh, that hurt. That hurt me.
It hurts. Don't push it so hard.
You know, with Paul, it was like he came in for the shoulder, but by the time he was done, he was taking his whole health seriously. It was like a full, I want to be healthy, fitness
Yeah, that's
forward
true.
kind of a patient. So it was good to see.
How's that
Amazing.
working for you today? You still on that track?
I am a serial killer. You know,
You had cereal this morning?
I had some cereal. Yeah, no, I am intermittently healthy.
Okay.
Although everybody is.
Right, we all are, really. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to, what do they say? Something or deny.
Neither
Anyway,
can confirm nor deny.
nor confirm nor deny which part of the intermittent I'm in right
Okay.
now.
All right.
It's not. Let's just say it's not intermittent fasting.
Well, you look healthy to me.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you look healthy to me. So, Jackie, why don't you give us a little bit of your story? You can start at any point, but love to hear a little bit more about you. Obviously, Paul's given us a little bit of background of where you've been in more recent time, but give us a little bit of story into who Jackie is.
So I'm a PT by trade. And when I met Pastor Paul, I was doing outpatient physical therapy in a clinic. So, private practice in a clinic. But simultaneously, I was treating patients in their homes. And that was really kind of fell in my lap. I picked up at-home jobs right out of school, and it was really like a weekend gig. And that really started to grow for me, treating patients at their homes, hiring other PTs to help treat patients at their homes. And my dad had a stroke in New Jersey. I was very close to my dad. He passed a few years ago, but he had something called recurring TIAs. So he had minor strokes over a long period of time. And what that did was land him in the hospital probably every 3 weeks. And I just started asking. I mean, I'm from New Jersey originally, so I was flying back and forth from New Jersey to Texas to help manage his care. And, every time my mom would say he's back in the hospital, we really couldn't figure out what he was receiving in the hospital that we really couldn't bring at home. So that was really the first inkling that there's this huge gap in care for these patients who spend so much time in the hospital, and they kind of get lost in the shuffle. They go to the hospital, you don't really know what they're doing in the hospital, why you have to be admitted. Patients always assume that it's because the hospital wants to make money, but really that wasn't the case and isn't the case most of the time. That is just how traditional healthcare is delivered. You go to the hospital, you're admitted, and they do things there. And so we started really figuring out what exactly is being provided in the hospital, and are we legally allowed to provide this at home? Like, if it was absolutely for free, is it within our scope of practice? And that line of questioning really evolved into what we do now. And our company is called Resilient Healthcare, but what we do now is hospital at-home services. So we partner with hospitals and we start shifting care, and not just physical therapy, but physician services, IV infusions. We have vent patients at home where we take care of their vents, ALS patients, etc. But we really recreated that hospital environment, but in patients' homes, so that we can reduce all the back and forth and the burden on patients.
Wow.
And as that also makes up, I assume, a lot of sense for hospitals as well, because providing a bed and all the in-hospital care has got to be astronomically different cost-wise.
5 years ago, we started, how old is my kid? 6. So we started 7 years ago. And at that point, it did not make sense for hospitals because there was no way for them to collect for this work. So for them, it felt like we were creating a competitive environment,
Yeah, you're going to be a
on
competitor.
a business level.
Yeah.
Fast forward, the pandemic happens, and we became pretty sexy pretty fast because these hospitals were getting crushed with patients. And Medicare approved a hospital at home program that allowed hospitals to provide care for patients in their homes and still be paid as if the patient was in the hospital. And so that opened up, it's like we were right place, right time, to be quite honest, but very prepared to take that on because these hospitals have not treated patients in their homes on an acute level. We were doing it really on an R&D basis prior to. And so we approached the medical city hospitals locally here. That was our first pilot program. And we said, we can help you get some of these patients out of your hospital and treat them at home. And hey, by the way, if we can get Medicare to approve your hospital, you'll still be paid for these patients. And so now they can extend their bed capacity without building another building. And if you follow real estate, to build another like hospital building, it's somewhere between $1.5 million to $2 million per bed is how they're pricing those builds.
Oh
So
my
for us, we
goodness.
come in and we say, we can extend your footprint and it's better for patients. They like it better. They prefer to be at home. You can still bill for it, but we'll treat these patients at home. I mean, not every patient will qualify for that, but over the last 5 years, it's been more and more patients that this makes sense for.
So in theory, Jackie, the hospital would see you as a partner then.
Yeah, so we exclusively sell into hospitals. We no longer bill insurance directly, and from the hospital's perspective, we provide them technology and management solutions so that they can provide these programs for their patient population.
And I imagine if you do the math, building a hospital, operating the insurances, and everything it takes to have a patient in a hospital, as opposed to treating them at home, they're still probably saving money by partnering with you.
Well, they're generating more revenue by partnering with us because now they can generate revenue at home. They're saving the payers money because the patients are staying home and not going back to the hospital often and not getting extra, care is so fragmented when you leave the hospital. They're like, you go see your PCP, maybe you have a specialist, maybe you got to it's just so many different pieces and things get lost, they get overutilized. And so when we start creating programs that are built out of the hospital into patients' homes, we can manage that process better. And so overall, it ends up saving the insurance's dollars. It helps the hospital generate more revenue that they normally would have just discharged them somewhere else. And so we are in a unique position that both, I guess, stakeholders, the hospitals, the insurance companies, and the patients benefit from what we do.
It occurs to me that this whole model is kind of how healthcare started, right? The doctors went to the homes.
Yeah, it's almost coming back to some of the origins. Jackie, are you guys basically only in Texas, or is this becoming nationwide right now, or?
It's becoming nationwide, so we have contracts nationally. We have a joint venture with Community Hospital Corp. We really focused on the smaller rural communities when we did that partnership with CHC. CHC is based out of Plano, but they have a footprint across the country. They own hospitals, they manage hospitals, they run a significant GPO, they do telecom for hospitals, and so that was our best joint venture that we could possibly have asked for. And we've launched in these rural areas. What we've built really improves access to care. Historically, patients, we have this one area where a patient needed an IV infusion. Because they're in a rural area, they would have had to go to the ER every day to get that IV infusion, which is not ideal. And so when we built these at-home programs, we started doing outpatient services in the patient's homes, and we started extending that hospital's footprint into their homes. And it saves the patient so much drive time, et cetera, which means they're more compliant with their infusions, and so they have less complications, and it's that whole cycle. But we started in Texas, and we are expanding nationally. This is our big national year, actually.
Wow.
It's interesting that you started out in physical therapy and end up with the whole scope of healthcare basically under the same umbrella. It's interesting. And you're not even doing physical therapy anymore. You're basically a business person, right?
I am basically a business person. I'm still licensed until the end of this month. I need to renew it, but I'm still licensed as a physical therapist. I treat probably one patient I do have one patient on my schedule right now just to keep my hands in the game. And I love treating, and I miss treating. I don't miss being burnt out by treating, but yeah, I'm a full-blown business person. And yes, I'm just a physical therapist, which comes up multiple times. We're running a full hospital gamut, and you're just a PT, but
yeah.
Well, I could see where dealing with patients like Paul could lead to burnout.
Well,
Yeah,
you
that
you
likely
have to look at
triggered
it like an education.
How's that?
Well, I provided an education.
How's that? You still haven't told me. You just said you.
Well, I mean, just to have me as a patient is an
Yeah.
education.
She got a double doctorate in suffering management.
I don't think that's where I was going, but I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Jackie, I'm curious, as a PT before where you are now in your career, so it's a kind of a double question. What brought you the most joy in PT when you were treating? And then maybe what's bringing you the most joy right now at this stage in your career as a businesswoman? What brings you joy?
That's a loaded question. So both careers, as a PT, you tend to get burnt out, especially more recently, because over the last 10 years, reimbursements have gone down for physical therapists, and they're not as, unfortunately, on a financial standpoint, as valued. 10 years ago, PTs made more money with inflation going up and the cost of school going up, and PTs actually make a little bit less now.
Wow.
So that in itself is a burnout for PTs. And then you create a company, which becomes more of a corporate conglomerate with like technology and national partners, etc. And then that in itself is burnout. So you have to love it to do either of those things, or else you wouldn't. What crazy person would? Joy on when I played soccer my whole life. I was an athlete growing up. I went to PT school so I can treat athletes. I was pretty specific in the runners world. So I treated a lot of runners, Boston marathoners, even like geriatric runners, 65 plus. And so that gave me a lot of joy, especially after getting to see them complete their Ironmans or their marathons, etc.
That geriatric treatment. That's
Yeah,
why.
is that how
that's
you
why
met?
Paul-
That's
I
where
knew
you met.
guys couldn't
That's
leave
why
it
Paul
alone.
was.
You
Yeah.
met-
Okay.
She met
It's
Paul.
starting to make sense.
That was
yeah.
before his accident.
Yeah, the
that was his
geriatric
treatment.
I knew you guys could not leave it alone. In my head,
I
I
sat
say,
patiently
Thank
because
you for
I
that,
didn't.
Jackie.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
I was loving
That
her
was the-
answer, so I sat patiently, but that was the right moment.
It's like we're playing softball now. Big fat pitch.
How would
Anyway.
you? Yeah, you were saying you've treated runners, and so you were passionate for athletes with PT.
Yep. And now I'm raising athletes. I have sons who are all playing sports, and so yes, I love treating athletes. I worked in home health really as a way to make some side money, pay off some student loans when I got out of school, because in home health you're able to pick up patients like almost like a gig economy, and we really leveraged that experience and that mindset and how we built our technology in more of a gig economy way. But I didn't think that I was going to love it. I mean, I didn't really go to physical therapy school to treat geriatric patients. And then when I started treating older patients in their homes, I fell in love with it. It was like, it's their environment. There's some not so much, but they come with this great history and all these storytellings. And there's a little Paul joke. You can jump in on that one too. But
we're giggling right now.
Jackie, don't encourage this. Don't
and
encourage
it's
it.
one-on-one. It's in their environment. You meet their families, their dogs. So
Yeah, so that personal relational connection added value. I had a follow-up question, and then I hand it back to our other host. You had mentioned burnout. Burnout, man, that's tough to be undervalued, right? You've put just as much schooling in and time and effort, and then for your career field to seem to be undervalued or pay goes down. What kind of advice would you give? How did you manage? How could you encourage someone to manage where they might be experiencing burnout or feeling undervalued?
So my career went through a lot of iterations of how I made money. So when I first started, I was a salaried employee. I went to the clinic on my shifts. I treated patients and I made my salary. Then I started doing home health patients, in which case I got paid like a per visit. Every time I saw a patient, I could clip for that, which really puts you in more of an entrepreneur mindset, because you're adding to your own schedule, you're getting paid per patient, you can try to guess how much extra money you're going to make. And then I started making more in that setting than I was in my salaried setting. So really I naturally started shifting to that at-home gig economy type of setting. Granted, when you leave your salaried environment, you're also leaving the cushion of, benefits and security and all of that. But there's so much business in that at-home space that it made sense. From there, we saw a significant shift in how home health agencies were getting paid. It used to be that home health agencies were incentivized financially by how much therapy a patient was getting. And so therapists were getting reimbursed appropriately. That changed the last a few years ago, and now it doesn't matter how many times you send a physical therapist out. And so if home health agencies are not getting incentivized by sending out the most expensive employee they have, which is typically therapists, they're going to reduce the amount of times that patients get seen. And so that shifted again how we got paid. And then I started my own staffing business. I started the private practice, and that's when I started treating Paul in the private practice. But I kind of took my financial career, and like I went to school in New Jersey. It's not cheap. Like I came out with 3 times the student loans that Texas people went to school. Like when you go to PT school in Texas, it's a third of the price. It's
Ouch.
the same national license.
Wow.
So, which is crazy. And so when I came here, when we built our resilient model, we shifted a few times about how we wanted clinicians to get paid. We've landed on, and this is really the heart of our technology, is that we want clinicians to get paid in a manner that they can build their own practices, but in our umbrella. So they're not having to deal with if a payer is not paying them, fighting a payer, etc. And we're building these programs so that clinicians who are doing house calls can go and work for the hospital, can be credentialed by the hospital, and can build their own stack up. When I had my private practice, I eyes wide open on how money moves in healthcare. My Paul came to see me, and if he was on, let's call it one of the payers, a commercial payer, if he came to see me and I billed out of my private practice under my license, I would make a third of what I would have got paid if he came to see me, but I worked at a clinic that was a corporate clinic or a hospital owned clinic for the same exact treatment.
Mm.
And so these
Wow.
private practices have so much, it's very hard. And sometimes they don't pay at all. They say they'll pay you, and then you have to fight for it, and they bank on the fact that these private practices are not going to hire attorneys to fight for their claims to get paid
Wow.
faster. So
Man. Wow.
So
there's
thus
my
the
rant.
burnout. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was talking about burnout and how you get burnout. So how did you find your way, personally out of like, oh, I'm just racked with burnout. How did you navigate that, or you just muscled through, or what?
I muscled through. Probably not the best answer to give, but I mean, I muscled through, and we continue to muscle through, especially with startup mentality. We've raised a good bit of money. We're continuing to raise as we grow, and so, but we don't want that for the next generation of clinicians, and so we're trying to build something that can manage that burnout for clinicians, where they can pick up patients and see patients in their homes and go back to their core competency without spending so much time on documentation, trying to get paid for the work they do, etc.
So, Jackie, if it's not proprietary information, can you share with us what your organizational structure looks like? So, are you the CEO? Are you one of the owners? And then what's the trickle effect? What's the trickle down effect from that?
I'm the CEO. I'm one of the founders, so I'm the CEO. We have a C-suite. So we have a chief operating officer, CIO, CFO. So we're structured, and this is a work in progress, right? When we started 7 years ago, we were not structured this way. Now we've grown to a point that we needed a corporate organizational structure. So
Sure.
yes, I'm CEO and president, and then we have a C-suite. Underneath that, we have a corporate team, and then we have people assigned per hospitals or per regions. And then our actual clinical staff is outsourced most of the time, and we outsource them through other agents, home health agencies or staffing agencies, or 1099 contractors,
Yeah.
depending on the region.
Yeah. And then you mentioned raising capital. Are you currently looking for partners? You going to go IPO? What are you thinking, or can you share that with us?
I won't share if we're going to go public or stay private. But I will say that we've raised a significant amount of capital over the last 3 years. The capital markets have shifted. We raised a Series A, no institutional money, over $10 million, but no institutional money. We are raising a Series B now, which will probably be the first time that we take institutional dollars. And since we're in the middle of that, I won't delve too much into if
Sure.
we're going public or staying private.
Yeah, but so you're still looking for some money if someone's interested.
Yeah, you got some?
Oh, maybe a little, but I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe somebody out
He's
there,
tight, Jackie. He's
maybe
so
somebody
tight.
out there's listening that's willing to write a check. So you never know.
Yeah, we are currently raising.
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't everybody always currently raising as a startup? We and I learned that after we started raising, and someone told me once you start raising, you're actually never done raising as long as you're still growing.
If you're
I was like,
growing, you
no,
always
no,
need
that's
more.
not going to be me. Here we are 3 years in.
Yeah, if you're always growing, you're always going to be needing a little bit more money, and sometimes you have to get more and more creative with how you get it.
Hey, what was really cool, a few weeks ago, Jackie and I were talking, or a few months ago, and she told me about this place down in Austin that was serving the homeless, a guy named Alan Graham, and I think he's been on Joe Rogan's show as a podcast guest, pretty significant guy, has created a model for homelessness in Austin, which is a huge problem, a little bit like Seattle, your hometown. And it's working to some degree. I mean, I guess it's like a drop in the bucket, with so much of this in the United States, but still, he's done something pretty interesting there. Tell them a little bit about that model that he created. We went down there to visit, she and I.
Okay.
Yeah, so I spoke at Plug and Play's. Plug and Play just opened 3 offices in Texas, and they had opened one near Austin. And so I spoke at their opening, and a man named Larry Smith also spoke. Larry, I want to say, is the board chair of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, and he works with Alan Graham. And after I'd spoken, we exchanged information, and he was telling me about this project. So initially they started Mobile Loaves and Fishes so that they can feed the homeless, and they did that for, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And they grew it to X amount of vans and X amount of communities. And and then they realized that feeding the homeless is not enough, and this is their passion. Alan is a developer, and he tells the story much better than I, but he's a real estate developer, and he really thought, okay, what if we got them homes? And so they got their first was they got an RV, and they've become friends with these people they've been feeding over the years, and they housed one in the RV, and they saw that they weren't staying in the RV, they were still going back to the homeless community. And so that went to, okay, giving them a home does not fix homelessness. Typically, people are homeless because they don't have the community and the resources around them to not be homeless. And so he had a lot of trouble at first getting the first plot. Not in my backyard was kind of the response from a lot of the communities. And he finally got some land in Austin. They're on their 3rd development now, but got some land in Austin, and he started building out tiny homes. They also built out 3D printed homes, which are really awesome. And they built an entire community there. And so the people who live there, they call them neighbors. They were formerly homeless, typically chronically homeless. So that's a 10 years on the 10 years of homelessness on and off. And they get them the right resources. And so they get them on their benefits, their Social Security, etc. And they live in these tiny homes, and they pay rent. So they set them up with the resources for them to be able to collect what is out there, as well as if they, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever they qualify for. And then on site, and I was so impressed, but on site they have like chickens, and they have a grow, and they all contribute to this garden, which is all free food at their market every, I want to say, Saturday. And they have an entrepreneur hub where they can create crafts, and they can sell those crafts, and it's pretty astounding. They have 500, I want to say, residents in that one section. They're building 2 more,
And that's
and
like
so they
on
will be at somewhere
50
between
acres.
1,500 and 2,000
Wow.
housed.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's on like
Which is,
50 acres.
Anyways, and so our role there is really helping stand up the healthcare aspect. He said an issue that they've had is that they're still having to call 911 for health emergencies or health issues, and they have a lot of fragmented resources there. So our approach was, well, we're extending care from the hospitals. Why don't we extend care from the hospital into this community? And so that's what we've been working on there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, pretty cool.
That is fantastic.
the way that happened. People that are chronically homeless have a shorter lifespan, so many of them are in poor health and older by the time
You know what's incredible? Alan moved in to the neighborhood.
the
Like,
CEO
lives
guy.
on site.
No kidding.
Incredible.
Wild.
Incarnation.
Yeah, for sure.
Move in.
Well, one of our themes, Jackie, on this podcast is talking about hard topics. And healthcare, I'm a CEO as well, and healthcare is always a very hard topic throughout an organization because it feels somewhat fluid because the cost structures are changing year over year, and sometimes they're changing significantly. And then with that, you've kind of alluded to this a little bit. It seems like cost rise and the care or the treatment that you're getting is not equal with the rising cost at times. So what are you seeing? I know we've got RFK coming in with the Trump administration, and they're talking about make America healthy again. What are you seeing right now that are some of the biggest challenges that our healthcare system is facing, let's say, over the next 5 years?
So I think well, first off, one party now has Congress, the House, Senate, etc. And so I think we're going to see a lot of significant changes in healthcare on a policy side. And we don't know what they are. I don't think anyone really does. Make America healthy again, separate from actual health policy. There is, what is allowed in our foods, what is allowed in FDA regulation. How come Fruit Loops are allowed in the US but not in Europe? Things like that.
Yes.
And I think that will make us healthier so we can get more preventative medicine. With healthcare, I think the way that I can describe it is there is before you get sick or what gets you sick, and preventative healthcare is something that our country lacks or doesn't take seriously enough. And then there is the chronic care management of healthcare. Okay, now you were here, you got sick, and then in this place right here, you're not at that acute phase anymore. It's not an emergency crisis, but you're chronically ill. And can we reverse some of that chronic illness? And can we take it a little bit more seriously than spending all of the high dollars are really spent in that top acute care emergency crisis?
Yeah.
And we just let it kind of fall off. And this is the bucket that actually costs us so much money over time.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's two different kind of policy routes to focus on. Yes, preventative care. We need to get food healthier here, etc. We're all on board. On the other side, our business model is literally pushing care to a different place of service. That's what we're changing. We're not changing much more else than that. And you said it, old school was doctors visited you in your home. Hospitals were never intended for the regular everyday Joe. They weren't. They were built for the homeless, essentially, or those who couldn't afford physician visits. And the only thing we're changing is the place of service, and that was a huge regulatory lift for us to change where I treat a patient, not what I do to treat the patient, but just where. And so I think if we can start making healthcare a little bit more common sense, why is there so much regulation around little things like physical therapy in the home versus physical therapy in a clinic? Even the way that reimbursement moves, I can treat a patient in their home under my own license and I'll get paid differently. I can treat a patient at home under home health, which I'll get paid differently. I can treat a patient under the hospital extension, I'll get paid differently. And I think they made it too complicated for nothing. And I guess if you can confuse them, then you can overcharge.
Yeah.
Our country, which I'm sure everyone knows, spends more than $4 trillion on healthcare a year. If you paid doctors nothing, if you paid physicians, clinicians, PTs nothing, they had to work for free, we'd still be spending $3 trillion a year. So that we need to manage.
So where is that? You got my curiosity up now. Where is the 75%, the 3 trillion that's left? What is that being spent on? Is this big pharma? Is it equipment? Is it where's that 3 trillion going?
Some of that infrastructure and then administrative.
Okay.
$1 trillion a year is going on administrative overhead. The people who decide how to spend the money are taking 25% of the money. It is insane to me. And we're in a world where we have technology that is built into every other industry, and in healthcare it's like archaic is the technology that we're using.
Yeah.
And so and something as simple as, let's just figure out, you walk into a hospital system and you tell them and you say, how much do you get paid per surgery, or how much do you get paid for a physical therapy visit? They'll tell you, we don't know. We have no idea. It is so confusing how we get our information back. We have no idea. Do you know how difficult it is for someone to manage a business when you have no idea
Yeah.
how much
It's not possible.
Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
or when you're gonna get paid? That's like, you walk into a restaurant, you order a pizza, you know how much you're spending on that pizza. You can figure out the cost of, the cost of the pizza and how much you're paying for that pizza, and you're getting paid right there. You in healthcare, these hospitals, I mean, you can forecast it, and you can use statistics and historical data and all of that to try to guess, but there is no, the two of you can walk into a hospital with the same insurance and the same issue, and the hospital will get paid differently on each of your procedures.
And they can't explain why.
Well, if you can't win them, you confuse them.
Yeah, right.
And it depends. Is your policy self-funded? Okay, if you guys have the same, and even to the point of, if you have the same policy and the same corporation you work for and the same out-of-pocket max, they still may pay differently for each one, depending on who looked at the claim and who approved it, and oopsie daisy. And
yeah, so one of the things we tried to do, the company that I own, we employ about 70 people globally, and about 45 of those are domestic, and we provide health care for all of our employees. It doesn't quite fall in the Cadillac policy, but it would get close to that. And so one of the things that we did was, I met with the CEO of the local hospital, and I said, hey, how about this? Like, I'm spending this many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to the insurance company, and the hospital's not getting that. The insurance company's getting that because they're getting that in premiums. My average age employee is in the mid-30s. We probably have one or two have a major medical event a year, if that. Sometimes it's zero. So I asked the hospital, I was like, hey, why don't we go through a list of all these services you provide? X-rays, surgeries, and just give me what my cost is. Like, I'm going to Walmart. What's it cost for somebody to come in and see a general physician? What's it cost for somebody to give in an X-ray? And I will sign a contract with you that I'll just pay the flat rate whenever they come in. Like, I want to try this for a year. And the answer is, we can't do that.
Not entirely true. Self-funded plans, corporations can do that. And we're seeing more of that, which I love to see. I'm hoping that as we grow we are committed that we're going to onboard 50 hospitals in 50 different markets by the end of this year on our platform. And that that means we have hospitals, and within those hospitals we have physicians and visiting nurses, and that can do anything from a shoulder replacement rehab to an ALS acute care at home episode. And so our push here is that these hospitals, we should be able to contract with corporations directly and save the corporations dollars. Now, the only person we really piss off when we do that is the insurance companies.
Yeah.
But these self-funded corporations, the money comes out of their pocket anyways.
Yeah.
And insurance companies are incentivized not to spend the money that they get.
That's a fact.
And
yeah.
so it eventually does dollar for dollar, it saves the corporations premium dollars to be able to go direct to providers. And we are seeing now a few, like, companies that are emerging that are becoming the middleman between hospital systems and corporations directly, so that they can reduce the premiums or the type of coverage that they're getting through insurance companies. And I would love to see more regulation around that, and or lack of regulation, essentially, and more corporations doing that, because it is astronomical what you pay for these insurance companies to not pay for healthcare.
Yeah, so, for example, you take a healthy 25-year-old, and if they were getting just a straight plan, it would cost a couple $100 a month. But I have somebody else who is in their later 60s and they're pushing 600 to 700 a month. Well, then they just average my policy out, and I can't be. It keeps me limited in where I can go, and so it's almost like I'm averaged up instead of averaged down, and then my premiums just continue to climb. So that's a as a business owner, that's very, very frustrating, because like part of our mission or our purpose is actually stewarding in the collective health of the planet and the people. And part of that philosophy is that we want to provide health care for our team members. It's not ever a question as to whether we're going to provide health care. But we feel like when the insurance companies pull dollars out of our organization, they're taking that out of all of our pockets, because we do profit sharing and we have stakeholder sharing and things of that nature. So I love what I'm hearing you talk about. This I feel like it is inventive and disruptive to the market, and I love that. That's fantastic.
So,
Thank you.
so Jackie, see, God loves you, and I have a wonderful plan for your life. That's what I want to say. So here's the thought I've got. Okay,
God has a plan for her life, or you have
No,
a plan?
I said, God loves you, and I have a wonderful plan for your life.
I will say it's felt very weird calling you Paul this entire podcast, because I've always called him Pastor Paul,
Yeah.
even as a patient.
Yeah.
I like you calling him Pastor Paul on the podcast, because that's going to be his name for the next few episodes.
Yeah.
Pastor Paul.
I can't get any
Pastor
respect
Paul.
here, Jackie.
Geriatric Pastor Paul.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's getting worse.
Geriatric runner.
silly boys.
Who runs
GP.
marathons.
Geriatric Paul.
So, here's the thought I had. Would not Jackie make a fantastic policy maker in the healthcare industry? Well, I mean, first of all, you do it disruptively in business, then it becomes a thing you can't ignore in the market, and then you go off the top ropes and be the point person for policy making. You're the woman.
Okay,
I
so
would upset a lot.
so here's my plan for you, Jackie. She's already a badass CEO, and that's what makes policy. So just hire a policy writer. You keep doing what you're doing, because real change comes from the CEO side.
Well, that's well documented.
Royce, what's your plan for Jackie's life?
No, I think you're perfectly suited, and I think the winds of change are happening, and I think there's probably going to be some more disruption coming. And man, I really appreciate all you're doing. I think it's amazing.
So we've talked a lot about
And
you. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to take us down another path, but I hate talking so much about how anti-insurance essentially I am, especially after what happened in New York in December. But I think that the notion is kind of carried throughout the country that insurance needs to do better. Not that anyone's life should ever be lost over it, but insurance needs to do better, so that people can trust the system a little. Like, patients don't trust the system. They don't trust the insurance company. They don't trust their doctors. They don't trust the hospital. They're afraid if they go to the hospital, it's going to bankrupt them. So there's got to be some transparency around that.
Yeah, I think when someone feels backed into a corner, that's where the frustration comes from, and you really only have a very limited amount of options. And I don't know anybody that talks about their insurance program around healthcare or working with the hospitals that are like, yeah, this was real pleasurable. Like I really enjoyed this. It cost me a lot of money, and I was really satisfied.
You were going to shift the topic a little bit.
Yeah, I just she mentioned her boys and her kiddos. So tell us a little bit about your family.
I have 2 sons and I have 2 stepsons, from the ages of almost 6 in a couple of weeks to 10. So my boys are 6 and 8, are about to be 6 and 8, and my stepsons are 7 and 10. So we have a full house of very much so boys. Nerf guns, baseballs, soccer
Nice.
balls, you name it.
So you're not only a CEO, but you have your nest is completely full.
My plate is full. Yeah, my husband's an engineer. He's German. He great dad. But yeah, it's a full house.
So he's German, like as in he's born and raised in Germany?
Born and raised in Germany, in Marburg, which is about an hour out of Frankfurt.
Okay.
And
Which
yeah, I just went for the first time in November.
which
I really
direction from Frankfurt?
say
North.
that again.
Which direction
Which
from
way?
Frankfurt? North, east, or west?
I want to say north.
Okay. How? So I have a plant right outside of Dusseldorf, which is about 2 hours from Frankfurt. Frankfurt's typically where I fly into when I go there, but
Yeah, we flew into Frankfurt and we drove
yeah.
an hour. I want to say north.
Okay.
But yeah, we stayed in Marburg. We loved it. The boys are travel boys now. Like they were being animals during winter break, so we had them right on a piece of animals. And I mean, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks out of school for the holiday is wild. We didn't get that much time off when we were their age. But
They were
by the end of
feral.
it, animals. And so we had them
They
write
went
on a piece
feral.
of paper like your privileges,
Oh yeah,
and on
nice.
another piece of paper the things you need to work on. And I said, we'll be back in an hour. Let's see what you guys come up with. And their privileges were like traveling, airplane, Europe, Germany. And then little things like iPad, ice cream, candy. And then the things they need to work on was like, fighting. Those, they can't keep their hands off each other. It's like fighting, whatever. And we went to privileges and we were like, okay, boys, can you survive without all of these things? And the older boys, which is funny, the older boys are like, no. And my 5-year-old was like, he just learned in kindergarten, you only need shelter, food, and water to survive. And he was like, yeah, you only need shelter, food, and water to survive. So we can survive without this stuff. And so we're like, so why do you think, so you can live without these things? Why do you think we do these things for you guys? And they're like, well, because you work really hard, so you want to spend your money on us. And I was like, no, it's so
No.
we can make you happy. It's because it makes you happy. It's not because you need it to survive. So we're in that stage of raising kids right now. So they know that they got to work on the work on list for them to get their privileges.
Yeah.
So,
I,
yeah.
I always find it. You saying that is funny. I have 2 kids, and anytime we're on vacation, I always remind them that they are not on vacation. I am on vacation. Like
Wow.
they get to live a life that is pretty pretty well off. So when we go on vacation, it's mine and their mother's vacation, not theirs.
Jackie also has a pretty interesting background with like her church background, right? So we're all believers, but she grew
Cliff
up in
and I are. Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So she, yeah, silly boys.
We lost his train of thought.
So no, I didn't.
How's it feel?
To
She
be
grew up in
interrupt-
New Jersey.
to
She
be
grew up in New
interrupted.
Jersey. Hang on. And her dad and mom both are Egyptian, right?
Yep.
And moved here before you were born, or what?
Before my dad, yep, my dad moved here first. He went back to Egypt. He met my mom. They got married, and then she came over.
Okay. And like,
Yeah.
so you grew up in a pretty close community. Mostly, what was it? Mostly immigrants, or
Yes, mostly immigrants, Coptic Orthodox. So, like Greek Orthodox, Coptic means Old Egypt, essentially. So, you know, Saint Mark, the disciples, started the Coptic Orthodox Church thousands of years ago. A lot of the traditions are still very old. But yeah, I grew up in a fairly close-knit Egyptian Coptic Orthodox community. I want to say less than 5% of Egypt is Coptic Orthodox. And so, although we are the descendants of pharaohs, but yeah, so we grew up pretty strict church upbringing.
and then that was interesting, like a little microcosm, that was foreign to you. Then after you left, there's no recreating that.
Yes, I know the Coptic church is growing in the Dallas region. We are not avid churchgoers down here. It's just a little different, you know. A lot of church was community, and I was probably like my family in New Jersey is still very much so part of the Coptic church, and you know it's 12-hour services on Good Friday and 4-hour liturgies and yeah. So when we go home, we'll go to that church, and that's when my boys will experience the Coptic church. They were both baptized in the Coptic church, but we're not avid churchgoers.
Yeah.
Don't tell my.
Don't tell your mother. Well, okay.
Don't watch this pod, Mom.
You know, she sent me, we've had an ongoing argument about Noah's Ark. And so the family joke now is that Jackie really does not like the Noah's Ark story, which I don't. And on Christmas, they sent me a children's Noah's Ark book in the mail.
Okay, so you got to share now. What's the argument?
It is a terrible story. I
Okay.
mean, even if it did happen, let's go. Is it a parable or did it really happen? Okay, we'll get past that. Say it did happen, and we're all aligned on that. What is the message? If I have 4 kids now, so I have a different outlook of the story. If all of my kids were really misbehaved, am I going to drown 3 of them and only save 1? And it isn't. I hate it. And my mom was like, "No, that's not the message." And I know the response. It's not the message. The message is to trust in God and blah blah blah. And I was like, "Okay." And she was like, "The other kids didn't listen." And I was like, "How many times do I yell at my kids and they don't listen? Would I drown them? Would I let them drown in the pool or the lake because they didn't listen about putting the?" And so I don't love the message of that story. And I don't think. And I know it's Old Testament. It's different, but.
Well, just stick to the rainbows and the animals. You'll be all right.
Yeah. Everyone does.
I like it. Nothing wrong with a little bit of pushing back on that. That's fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, I know that her faith is deep, and I think that sometimes, our church experiences can kind of taint, our walk in ways that are negative. But it seems that, when your faith is embedded, it doesn't matter what that experience is or how you express it. It kind of stays, that part of it stays intact.
Yeah.
And I know I see that in Jackie, and she's very kind to people and lives out the message of Christ in the way she treats folks. And
yeah.
So cool stuff.
Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Coptic church in Egypt, are they fairly persecuted?
Yes, very much so. Lately has not been as much, but I remember growing up, it was, it's fairly dangerous regardless, but as a Coptic, I will say after 9/11, we had a priest in New Jersey. I grew up in the East Brunswick Church, which is one of the largest Coptic churches in East Brunswick, New Jersey, but one of the largest, I want to say, in the entire U.S. We had a priest who used to work in the Twin Towers, and he was there for 9/11, and he made it out. He was on, I think, like the 70-something floor.
Oh, wow.
He carried like an old lady out all the way down. He made it out. After that, he was ordained as a priest. He actually married me and baptized my kids, but he had a lot of death threats after that. Because Egyptians and Coptic Orthodox are highly persecuted. And I remember we went to church on New Year's that year, which is my birthday, but on New Year's, and the church sent out a warning to say the church has received a lot of death threats, and, terrorist death threats, etc. And so we are going to have SWAT. So the church had a SWAT team, and we all had to get checked before we went into the church on New Year's Eve. And I remember telling my mom, like, I don't want to die on my birthday like this. Can't we pray at home? God is everywhere.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to die on the ark
Jersey, we
or
experienced some of that, which is crazy, but it's 10 times worse back home. And there was growing up, I remember like a few times where there was bombings in churches, and we had to check on family back in Egypt and all of that.
And where, if you can say, where is most of that persecution coming from?
Oh, I think it's pretty obvious.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I don't know which terrorist organization.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was the obvious or something else, but yeah.
The obvious.
And so you mentioned regarding the Coptic faith, it's something that I have heard of before, but not really studied out. So the ties of the Coptics go all the way back, you said, to Saint Mark?
Yes.
So can you unpack that for us a little bit? Just give us a little bit of the history there.
So 12 disciples went out to educate the world. Saint Mark went to Egypt. Saint Thomas went to India, for example. There's also an Indian Orthodox Church, and that was started by Saint Thomas. Coptic Orthodox Church was started by Saint Mark through Alexandria, and then They had a big church in Alexandria, and then from there is where the teachings happened. And Egypt was a Christian country until it wasn't. But
And do you know what year was that in when they went from Christian to Muslim?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. And we grew up. I mean, we've had my parents grew, and there were pockets of peace in Egypt, and we grew up with Muslim friends and Christian friends, and it's unfortunate that Coptics have been persecuted for so long, but that's not to say there was no pockets of peace. There were.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's
How do you find that? I know you have a real affinity toward that. That history. In your heart, it's like nostalgic for you, and there's a warm place in your heart for, your faith history. How do you feel like that translates for you now?
My kids are not being raised the way that I was raised, and so I grew up going to church 4 times a week. If I had a Bible study or I had track practice, guess which one I had to go to. So I think that was a little bit too extreme. Whereas my kids they're not raised in that strict Orthodox community. We're teaching them faith, and so I think that it's kind of shaped my motherhood a little bit, and how I think we turned out all right, but we've loosened a little bit compared to how we were raised. Although I have younger sisters, we call them second generation. Essentially, we were teenagers when my parents had the twins, 2 girls, and they were raised a lot less strict than we were raised. So I think everyone is kind of evolving to a little bit less stricter nature. And I know, Pastor Paul, you as well. You were a little bit stricter in your last church versus your current church, and so I think there's a little bit. And I was surprise, I was the one who always kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. And growing up, I would ask my mom, well, is that religious or is that cultural? Because there is a lot of cultural influence, and that doesn't mean that it was embedded in the religious faiths. And so, the response was really like, enough. Now I understand the enough response because I have 4 kids of my own. But yeah.
Well, going back to the core truths and using the Scripture as a root is a good practice, to hark back to, and I suppose will always be changing on some level, as you look at universal truth and how it applies to, current culture and our, raising our kids. You get a whole new idea about what you want to do with your faith when you see your kids start coming up, and you're like, oh my gosh, something's got to happen here. They're going to go feral on us, like you said.
Oh, my kids are already feral.
Well, love you very much, and just so impressed, always have been, with your journey, and I wanted you to be on here and for these guys to meet you, and I think that's not the last time we're going to hear about Dr. Jackleen Samuel and her rise. Dr. Jackleen Samuel Close. That's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hyphenated it this time. Second time around.
Yeah, Flo, he's got to get in there. You know what I mean? Anything you want to say?
So, Jackie, tell us one more time, what's your organization called?
Resilient Healthcare.
Resilient Healthcare.
Coming to a home near you.
Coming to a home near you. And if you're looking to write a check, she's looking to receive it. Very nice to meet you, Jackie. Wish you all the best, and get those kids outside, make them do something today with all the weather we've got. Nice to meet you. Take care.
Thanks, gentlemen. It was great to meet you.
That's a wrap, boys. Bye-bye. Let's go.